Well, I didn't get my fade out. I was in the mood for country this morning. Some of you may have an idea why. I'm just going to say this. If you have not gone and listened to Cowboy Carter yet, you guys should do it. Like, just go do it. It is an epic work of art. And I stayed up late listening to it. I bet a lot of you did too. So it's so good. Seriously, I think Beyonce has just like remade American music. I am like still speechless. Okay. And I'm trading lyrics already with my bestie of all time from Two Most Wanted. If you have to start with something, start with the duet with Miley Cyrus, because it will blow your mind. All right. Welcome. It's Resistance Live for the 29th of March, 2023. I'm ECM. We have more horror show stuff to talk about this morning with the former president. This will not surprise any of you, but I have to start where I always start, which is that I'm coming to you as always from occupied Tongva territory today for our visually challenged viewers. And by the way, thank you so much for your positive feedback about the inclusion efforts that we make here at this broadcast. I got a ton of comments from followers, new and old, on the broadcast yesterday about how much you enjoy and welcome and are grateful for. We have a number of blind viewers here, the efforts that I make before every broadcast to make sure folks are included. So today, for our visually challenged viewers, I'm wearing a white linen button-down blouse. My thin gold hoops are in. My hair is pulled back. I am a pink-skinned, green-eyed, dirty blonde-haired woman, and I'm in front of my plant and my standing lamp and my big cushy chair, like always in my home office. Welcome. Okay, so we're going to start today talking about the ongoing attacks by Donald Trump against Judge Juan Merchan's daughter. Now, I have to say something because I've already seen some comments floating by here on the live stream about how Judge Juan Merchan should up his game. And I have to say something about this that I think it may be sliding past some people here, all right? I want to remind everybody that there was a judge in New Jersey who was targeted by someone who had appeared in her courtroom, who showed up at her front door, executed her son, and then shot her husband, okay? And I don't think anyone on this broadcast or otherwise should be attacking Judge Merchan for how he chooses to respond to these attacks on his family. If you're going to turn your anger anywhere, you should be turning it toward Donald Trump, because many of you may have seen, by the way, last night, and this relates to what we're talking about here, the interview with Judge Reggie Walton, who is an incredibly well-respected jurist, last night on CNN, where he talked about the death threats that judges that are overseeing the Trump litigations are facing right now, and the fear that is bubbling through the judiciary right now, that one of Donald Trump's followers is going to literally show up with a gun and do something horrendous toward the judges that are overseeing what's happening in the cases. All right. And I want everybody to understand, Judge Walton made the point last night, and it's a very good one, that we don't have a democracy if we don't have a functioning two-party system, and also if we don't have a functioning judiciary. And one of the things that people need to understand is that the judges, the federal judges in America, have never faced down, and the state judges, because Judge Merchan is a state judge, have never faced down the kind of threats of violence that are currently underway against them, their staff, their courtroom personnel, their family members, like what we are seeing right now as a result of what Donald Trump is doing. And I think people have to take a big pause right now in the kind of rage that I see from some followers here about what the judges are or are not doing, okay? And one of the reasons for that is that, for all we know, there will be another extensive gag order dropping before Judge Merchan's trial starts in, a scant 17 days. But I will also tell you that I'm 99% certain that what is happening behind the scenes in terms of securing security is as important, if not more important, than whether or not Judge Merchan takes an action to lock up Donald Trump or do something else. All right. I think that everybody, you know what? You're blocked. Anybody who says that this is the judge's own fault really needs to check themselves like immediately, because none of this results from judges not doing the right thing. In my mind, and I've said this here before, but I'm just going to say it again. In my mind, when someone says this is the fault of the judge, it is the equivalent of blaming a victim of sexual assault for what they were wearing. Okay. The blame for all of this falls with Donald Trump and white supremacists and white nationalists that follow him, who are down the rabbit hole and prepared to engage in violence as a result of the things that he has said. And I'm just going to say one thing about this, okay? That threat of violence is going to exist whether or not Donald Trump is locked up as a result of the things that he has said about Juan Merchan's daughter or not. Okay, does everybody understand that? Like, we're in a place right now with the demographics of this country and the people who are still in the cult, however shrinking that number may be, where Donald Trump doesn't actually have to say anything anymore. Now, he has put a target on Juan Merchan's daughter. And that in and of itself, as we have discussed now, this is the third broadcast where I've talked about it, okay? One of the things that folks need to grasp here is that he is targeting folks outside the scope of public figures, all right? One of the reasons why the DA is not included in the gag order in Judge Merchan's original order is because the DA has already said, I understand that I'm a public figure and I ran for election and I signed up for this, okay? That's very different from targeting the judge's daughter. But I'm going to tell you right now that I am far more interested in making sure that the judge and his family have the security in place they need to be safe, whatever that means, okay, that we are not going to know about because we're not entitled to know about it, than I am at the moment about whether or not a hammer is going to be dropped on Donald Trump as a result of this, all right? Because my preference would be to make sure the judge and his family and his staff and his courtroom personnel and other people inside that courthouse are safe first, and then we will deal with the sanctions against Donald Trump. All right. So I have to say one other thing here. One of the things that is particularly dangerous about the disinformation cycle that we are living in right now is that one of the tactics that we see in disinformation campaigns, and I'm not the first person to draw a line through this. Barbara McQuaid was talking about this yesterday as well. All right, is that this whole thing with Judge Merchan's daughter smells like an active disinformation operation. Why? Because her Twitter account was closed and locked a year ago. Then it was hacked. False information was put on it that did not come from her about Donald Trump. And now he has weaponized that information to gin up his base, to drive division, to cause people on our side of the fence, we just saw it happen here, blame the judge, right? I'm just going to say this. If you, as a viewer of this broadcast, are blaming the judge for what is happening to the judge, you are actually doing Donald Trump's dirty work for him. Why? Because you are seeding distrust in the judiciary. Does everybody get that? If you are blaming the judge for the fact that Donald Trump is engaging in stochastic terrorism, you are seeding distrust in government institutions. Does everybody, I really want people to get clear on this, okay? The only person who should be blamed for this is Donald Trump and his people, okay? That's the only parties that are to blame for this set of circumstances, all right? Now, one of the things that I want people to get here is that there has been an enormous uptick in personal security for prosecutors, district attorneys, judges, other personnel who are witnesses, jurors, right? Everybody who is involved in the prosecutions and the litigations against Donald Trump has had to employ private security, okay? And I'm going to remind all of you that all of this stuff only began 3 days ago. The gag order went into effect on Tuesday afternoon. He started attacking Judge Merchan's daughter on Wednesday. Okay. So we're in a very tight window of time here where the court and the personnel and their family members are having to respond in ways that create boundaries of security. Okay. I'm also just going to mention to everyone that the gag order came down within a few hours. Actually, I'm wrong about the timing on this. He attacked his daughter on Tuesday morning and the gag order came out Tuesday afternoon. So we're on a very tight timetable here in the context of exactly what is happening. And everybody needs to just like also understand, okay, like really grasp this, that Trump is not going to stop doing this if he is in prison, okay? There are other means by which this information is going to get out. He's not going to be stopped by a gag order. Okay. And everyone understanding that this is all part of a massive disinformation cycle to seed distrust in institutions, which, by the way, creates division among Democrats. It makes our democracy less stable. Needs to, like, you need to understand what it is. Okay. It's not just Donald Trump seeding violence. It's also an active disinformation campaign designed to seed distrust in the judiciary. All right. So folks need to see the totality of what is happening here. And I will talk about the gag order again in a little bit more detail, because I would not be surprised to see some modifications coming down the pike. More on that in a minute. But I do want to mention one thing here, okay? I have mentioned this before, but I'm going to mention it again. We're running this disinformation literacy campaign starting April 15th. Right here is the link for it, Gaia Leadership Project /truth-or-fiction. If you are one of those people who has taken up this particular set of actions and run with it to blame the judge or to blame the judiciary, which is not that far from they're getting what's coming to them, right? You are actually actively participating in disinformation. And I don't want anybody in this audience doing that, not from a perspective of shame, but because I want you all to know better, okay? And one of the ways that you can know better is by getting an education on how disinformation campaigns work. All right. This tactic of like false information that then gets amplified to seed division and create violence is a classic authoritarianism campaign strategy of disinformation. There's nothing about it that's unusual. It's something that has been done all along. All you have to do, by the way, is think about things like the Reichstag fire in 1930s Germany, which was a false flag operation that then became weaponized by Hitler's regime to seed hatred toward the Jews. It is a very similar strategy, all right? Because Donald Trump wants no one to trust judges, no one to trust democracy, no one to trust the federal government, okay? How do you do that, even for people not on your side of the fence? You seed a campaign that causes people to blame a judge one way or another, right? Blame the judge because he's a rabid Democrat. He's just persecuting me because he hates what we stand for, make America great again. Or hate the judge because you think the judge hasn't done enough. Either way, he wins, right? So if you're interested in learning more about how active disinformation campaigns work and about media literacy and about preserving democracy by combating it, please consider getting in on this, all right? Like, it's going to be worth your time. It's only 4 weeks of a program, and you're going to learn everything you need to know about it. Okay, let's talk just for one more second about the gag order itself, because I talked about this when the gag order first came into play on Wednesday's broadcast, how it could be enforced. And I mentioned at the time that there was kind of like a little bit of nuance in the way the gag order was written, and I wasn't sure whether or not Judge Merchan was going to interpret it to include his own family members, all right? Because it talks about family members of staff, and that arguably may or may not include the judge, okay? And there was a reference to Trump attacking the judge's daughter earlier in that order. So generally speaking right now, we still don't know how Judge Merchan is going to interpret this order itself. There's a lot of legal folks like myself who think that the chances are that, he's going to have to issue a slightly larger, broader gag order in order to actually meet the response. But I do want people to understand one thing about this. It would not be unusual now, given the window of time, like we're now just like a little bit closer to the trial date, right? Like we're 17 days away right now from Donald Trump going on trial for the first time ever for criminal allegations against him, felonies. One of the things that I want people to get here is that the judge may decide in very short order that a much broader gag order needs to drop in advance of the trial. No comments to the press of any kind would not be unusual in a case of this magnitude and this much public significance, okay? I want everybody to think, by the way, about what's happened in the context of, for instance, mafia prosecutions. Those are cases where literally like the gag order has been so tight that no one is allowed to comment on the trial until it's over, Okay. And that would not be unusual here. And again, I just have to say, for people who are infuriated, okay, I want you to think about what it would be like if you were a judge randomly assigned to oversee the prosecution of Donald Trump, having taken an oath of office, knowing that your responsibility was to make sure that the trial was conducted fairly and publicly, and the defendant started attacking your child, okay? The only person who you should be angry at is Donald Trump, okay? I can't say it enough. If you are joining the broadcast now and you have not gone back to watch this broadcast for the first 16 minutes of it, please go back and start from the beginning, all right? Because it is incredibly important for people to really get the full scope of what is happening here. All right, my prediction at this point is that Judge Merchan is going to issue some kind of a larger gag order, a broader gag order before the trial actually starts. And at this point, there would be a real reason for him to do that. One of the things that he was plainly concerned about in his initial gag order was the potential interference with the trial itself. And that's the reason why the initial gag order had 3 categories about which Trump was not allowed to talk, including prospective jurors, all right? But we're in a situation now where the threats keep coming, even though it is very clear that the initial basis for Trump's attacks is false, non-existent. There's been a statement out of the court on that basis, okay? And from the perspective of where we are right now, the judge's strongest interest from a professional standpoint has to be in preserving the sanctity of the trial process and making sure that it is not interfered with, all right? So we're going to have to just take a pause, trust that the judge is doing what he thinks is in the best interest of the trial, the preservation of the judicial process, and his own family, okay? Because I'm just going to say one other thing here. I am certain, after what we have seen of Judge Juan Merchan in this courtroom, that he is not hesitating to do something because he's afraid, all right? He has been incredibly no-nonsense, more no-nonsense than any other judge before whom Trump has appeared in the court events so far where Trump has been in the courtroom or his attorneys have been present, all right? And I am in a place where, as a New York lawyer, I am putting my faith in his decision-making. I have no reason to doubt that he's doing exactly the right thing, right? He's been like no BS from the very beginning about Trump and his attorneys and all of their insane delay tactics and everything else. So I don't think Judge Juan Merchan has suddenly flipped a switch where he's like not going to hold Donald Trump accountable. I think that what is likely happening is that they are making decisions behind the scenes for their own safety, and that what's going to happen next is going to be something that preserves the sanctity of the trial. All right. And we don't know what that's going to look like, but I'm not going to doubt that that process is underway because I don't have any reason to. All right. And none of you should either. I'm just going to say that. You know, I am really fed up at this point about the blaming of judges in response to a fascist, stochastic terrorism oriented presidential candidate who is under indictment. I'm not blaming the judges for how they responded, because I'll just say one other thing. I know lots of people are pissed off that Judge Engoron just fined him $15,000. You know, you have to look at this through the lens of how this ordinarily works. A $15,000 fine in a civil courtroom in New York City is unheard of. Like, you have to be so far over the line to get sanctioned in that manner. And I think a lot of people just don't understand it, right? They don't understand that that's like, really, you have to be like so far beyond the pale to have an experience of that. Now, we are in a criminal case today. Yes, he could expand the gag order in such a way that it would include his family members and himself. It would not be beyond the pale for him to do that, okay? But at the moment, my bet is that that at this point, what's happening behind the scenes is some form of security analysis, all right? And I think people need to just like take a breath, all right? Because the other thing is, he's Trump. And I just have to say this, okay? I don't think anything is going to shut him up. And I have said from the very beginning of this series of indictments, all the way back in August, okay, that the aim of where we sit right now, okay, should be not to freak out about the latest, craziest thing that he's done, but to focus on what really matters here. Because I'm just going to say one other thing here. The more that we spend time obsessing and panicking over what Donald Trump has done, the the less time we have to focus on what actually really matters most this year, which is getting out the vote, right? Doing the work of preserving democracy at the ballot box. And the more that we are panicked and in a fight, flight, freeze, or fawn response, the less likely it is that we're going to be actually focused on action. All right. So all of this weaves together. And, I also just have to say that everything that I've said this week about the preservation of the trial process also goes for purposes of the appeal, because the last thing that we want here is a court of appeals overturning a conviction of Donald Trump because the judge did something without proper cause, without due process, that is over the line. Okay, so like you've got to have a big picture and a long game, and you've also got to take the anxiety that you are feeling and direct it toward getting out the vote. All right. Okay. I don't know what the judge is going to do, but I'm just going to say it would not surprise me one bit to see an expanded gag order, and it would not surprise me to see it, like today. It would also not surprise me to see it next week. All right. So again, everybody take a big, deep breath and just trust, by the way, that the security precautions are what is probably taking the most time right now. Okay. There was a fundraiser last night in New York City. And I know a lot of you come here because you want the good moment. So let's just take a moment and describe what happened last night. Stephen Colbert interviewed Joe Biden, Barack Obama, and Bill Clinton all on the stage at Radio City Music Hall. As of this morning, that fundraiser has raised $26 million for the Biden reelection campaign. It's the biggest fundraiser in U.S. history for a presidential campaign. And it was streamed for people who were donors. It raised an enormous amount of money, and it's not over yet, because this morning what we learned is that today Biden and his team are meeting with the highest value donors in the nation who are backing Democrats this season. These include people who can give, I think, up to $1 million to a super PAC to support the reelection of Joe Biden. All right. And they are doing a day-long retreat with these high-value Democratic donors. You have to have made a donation of at least $47,000, I think, in order to even be present. But there's a lot of other high-value donors there. Now, one of the things that I want everybody to kind of be mindful of in the context of this is that Donald Trump is running out of money, and so is the RNC. Why? Because they've had to pay over $100 million in legal bills for his 91 separate indictments in 4 different places, plus all the defense allegations for E. Jean Carroll and the New York civil fraud case over the last few months. And they're down to nothing, and their fundraising operation is wilting on the vine. And that's probably because all of his small money donors have finally woken up to the fact that the money's not going to save him. It's actually going to his legal bills. And that is not the way that I think a lot of small money donors want to spend their money in this election season. So Donald Trump is in trouble. And the other thing that you should just look at, because there are some grids out about this morning that show that the Biden reelection campaign has really upped its digital strategy investment. Now, I know I've recommended to a lot of you, please follow Biden Harris HQ on Threads. That is the rapid digital response team for the campaign. They're hilarious. I mean, they're doing so much great work. Go look, for instance, at their mock-up of Donald Trump's calendar from yesterday if you want to experience some really good shade. They're incredible. But the investment of the Biden campaign fund in digital strategy is here. Trump's investment in anything is down this way, right? It's plummeting, just Truth Social stock. And so one of the things that means, by the way, and I've talked about this a lot over the last couple of weeks, is not just really bad for down ballot candidates, but it's also really bad for the presidential, because they don't have money. The money that they need is being spent on Trump's legal bills. And that means that they're not going to be able to combat all of this in real time. And given that, Biden Harris HQ, given that there is a real need right now, and I have to remind everybody here who's doing get out the vote work, which I hope you all are in some form, text banking, phone banking, deep canvassing, door knocking. There's so many opportunities to volunteer. One of the things I have to remind everybody of here is that we're after disaffected and disenchanted voters. And one of the ways you get to them is through humor, through peppering the airwaves on all fronts, TikTok, Threads, everywhere, Instagram, everywhere that they appear digitally, right? And making sure that those messages are getting through to people who are not ordinarily paying attention. Because preaching to the choir doesn't matter. Preaching to the cult is a waste of time. It's the middle ground of people who are not political junkies, like a lot of people in this audience, who are not deeply invested in getting out the vote for 2024. Those are the people who need to be reached. And the investments that are being made by the Biden-Harris campaign that they are now going to be able to make a lot more of, thanks to last night and today, are targeted for exactly that strategy. And it's really effective. Okay, so we need more of that. And then on top of it, we have the DNC as a result, being able to make great investments in down ballot candidates. I'm going to say it again. This is a once in a generation opportunity to flip red seats blue, because there's not going to be any money for down ballot candidates coming out of the RNC. None. It's going to go to Trump and his legal bills, and they're going to be broke. Like, they've got like 15 million in cash on hand. That's like nuts at this point in a presidential cycle. Okay, so people really need to understand that this kind of stuff makes a big, big difference in the context of the landscape that we are operating in right now for the 2024 election cycle. And I have to remind everybody, please, get invested in your local candidates, right? Because the reverse coattails effect is really real. When people get invested in local elections, they get invested in elections all the way up the Democratic ticket. And if you care about your school board, you care about your environmental protection boards, you care about your city council and your county council and who's running for mayor, you will get people involved because of what matters to them locally that will then incentivize them to vote Democratic all the way up the ticket. All right. So please, let's take this chance and run with it. It's just critically important. And again, I'm going to say what I said the other day. We have commentators saying it here also. No Republicans unopposed. Period. If you are thinking about running for office, you still have time. Let's get to it. All right. I was asked to comment briefly on what's going on in Baltimore with the bridge, because one of the things, speaking of disinformation, is that there has been an enormous disinformation campaign after the Francis Scott Key Bridge went down a couple of days ago about the cause of it. And, the far right has done this insane thing of blaming the whole thing on DEI. I mean, I just have to say, I wish they would just say that they want white people in charge of everything, because that's literally all that the messaging is right now. Oh, it's all to blame for anybody who's not white. I'm really sick of it. And I will also just say that Pete Buttigieg has done an incredible job responding to this. So has the mayor of Baltimore and the governor of Maryland. This has been an incredible effort. By the way, if you missed the interview with the mayor of Baltimore on MSNBC a couple of days ago about this whole DEI thing, I encourage you to go watch it, because he was on it. He basically said on the air that, they just want to say the N-word so bad, and instead they know they can't say it, so they're saying DEI instead. True. Okay. But I want everybody to understand that this kind of disinformation response is all they have. Right. And you also have to ask a question, because there's been this whole debate about the elections that are happening in Maryland this year, and how the Republicans have been desperately trying to get Republicans elected in Maryland. How are you going to do that if you're saying the federal government should not be giving money to rebuild a bridge to one of the nation's largest ports in Maryland's largest city? Again, I have to just point out that the logic of it is I don't even know. There's no explanation for it, right? From the standpoint of the issues surrounding election strategy, what they're doing is incredibly self-sabotaging. I mean, it's not the first time, right? By far, but it is definitely something that at this moment, raises eyebrows, even by Republican advisors. Okay. But that's what they're doing. They're saying that Secretary Pete being gay caused the bridge to go down. The fact that somebody who works in the ports is Black caused the bridge to go down. That's essentially what they're alleging. And it is a massive disinformation campaign. And it's also insane, right? So again, I want people to understand that they are turning to strategies of disinformation and propaganda all the time, even in places where it makes no sense, right? We know what happened here, okay? A cargo ship lost power and ran into a pylon, and the bridge fell down. That's it. Right? And it's a horrible tragedy. And a ton of undocumented, not a ton, but 6 undocumented immigrants filling potholes on the bridge are dead as a result of that. Right? Also, very few people are talking about that. Right? How undocumented immigrants keep America running. So I just have to kind of put the whole scope of this in play. Right? There's a lot going on in relation to this that also relates to disinformation. Again, I'm just going to put the banner up here because why not? You can get in on our program about media literacy, disinformation, and such at GaiaLeadershipProject.com/truth-or-fiction. Class starts on April 15th, and it will help you to navigate this insanity. All right. I just want to mention one other thing here with regard to the Baltimore bridge situation, though. This port is an incredibly critical port to U.S. commerce. It's not just critical for Baltimore. It's critical for Pennsylvania because a lot of coal moves through there. Okay. It's the #1 port for sugar exports. And the implications here of saying, as the Republicans have said, no federal money should be going to repair this, right? Which is also racist because they don't want money going to a city and a state that are being run by Black men. I have to say that the downstream concerns here are real, right? There's potentially huge implications to the supply chain. And the sooner that the port gets back up and running, the less of an impact to U.S. commerce this accident is going to have. So I have to point out one other thing here. Joe Biden managed to pass a huge infrastructure package. And that meant, for instance, that when a part of I-95 went down in Philadelphia, they rebuilt it in like a month, like 3.5 weeks. Again, unheard of because it was such a critical piece of infrastructure to the Eastern corridor, the Eastern Seaboard corridor, right? This is the same story. And the fact that we have those funds available is due to Joe Biden, right? So again, for everybody who's like, why does infrastructure matter? I'm just going to tell you, this is why infrastructure matters, right? Because it affects commerce. It affects the U.S. economy. It affects livelihoods. It affects like the trajectory of whole regions of the United States of America. So everyone needs to kind of just grasp that Joe Biden and Pete Buttigieg have stepped up here, and the mayor and the governor of Maryland are doing a phenomenal job. And all the credit for this goes to Democrats, right? And they're going to rebuild that bridge as fast as possible. The largest crane in like human history is moving in the direction of that particular bridge right now to be able to pull like tons of debris out of the water so the rebuilding process can start as quickly as possible. So please, let's understand the significance of this from a commercial standpoint, but let's also understand who's doing the work, right? The work is being done by Democrats, by this administration, by a phenomenal Secretary of Transportation. And let's ignore the noise. All right. Okay. Final thing that I wanted to talk about today is Crystal Mason. I have to tell you, this is some incredibly good news. So if you don't know who Crystal Mason is, you probably have heard her story. She is a woman who was out on probation, who did not know that given that she was out on probation, she was not supposed to be allowed to vote. And she cared very much about being able to vote. And so she showed up to vote, cast a ballot. That ballot was never counted. And a local Texas prosecutor prosecuted her for voter fraud. She is a Black woman. I'm just going to say this never would have happened to a white guy. And she was sentenced to 5 years in prison for this mistake on a vote that was never counted. Yesterday, a Texas Court of Appeals threw out her conviction. And she's been waiting for this for 6 years. Okay, so she is now a free woman. And she's also very deeply engaged as a result of this in the voting rights issue. But this is something that a lot of us have been waiting for. And I have to say, in Georgia, yesterday, it was determined that there was a Georgia election official who fraudulently voted 9 times in the 2020 election. And that guy is getting a slap on the wrist. So Crystal Mason, even in a Texas Court of Appeals court, they could look at this and be like, this is ridiculous. It's ridiculous. This sentence is ridiculous. The conviction is ridiculous. But I have to say that it's a moment. Yes, and a poll worker told her she could vote too. So it wasn't even like her fault. All right. One of the things that I just want people to really understand here is that it's not this case was not just about Crystal Mason, right? Because what it was that it was a test case by far right white prosecutors to try to keep Black former felons from ever being able to vote. And there's been a whole debate in this country over the last 6 years about the fact that the felons can't vote thing keeps 1 in 5 Black men from being able to vote in this country, partially because of our incredibly racist prison industrial complex. And so this was actually a selective prosecution designed to deter people from showing up to vote, even when they have the right to do so, because they would therefore be afraid of being prosecuted. The fact that this conviction has been overturned is not just significant for Crystal Mason. It's significant for voting rights as a whole. And I'm just going to say one thing. I believe that former felons should have their right to vote restored after they have done their time. Period. Because this is another way in which disenfranchisement has been used against Black people in this country in particular, and that sways elections. So I hope that she sues. I hope she gets an enormous settlement as a result of it. But I'm also just going to say that, you know, I've been looking for reasons why tides are turning lately. The fact that a Texas State Court of Appeals tossed out this conviction is another sign of hope. All right. And I want everybody to just please grasp that voter suppression is underway everywhere. Texas is a voter suppressed state. Again, I have to say this. Do not blame the voters. Like, do not blame the victims of this. The efforts have been underway in places like Texas and Louisiana and Alabama and Florida to keep Black folks from voting on purpose, and Georgia and plenty of other places. All right. It is rampant and it deserves to be combated. And once we take back the House and we keep the Senate, passing the John Lewis Voting Rights Act is got to be like one of the top tier first week things that has to happen come January of 2025. All right. I don't care that Trump won't be able to vote for himself going forward. He's not going to run again after this. He's not going to be capable of running again after this. All right. So like, I'm not bothered by this. Okay. I think even Trump, if he does his time, and I'm just going to say this, he's not going to make it out of prison alive if he's sentenced, because the sentences are going to be so long when they pile up like this that he's going to be in prison for the rest of his life. All right. But I'm going to say this again, because this is something I teach you in law school. Hard cases make bad law. And just because you don't want Donald Trump to be able to vote for himself is not a reason to give every wrongly prosecuted Black man in America who's been victimized by the prison industrial complex to have their right to vote ripped away from them for the rest of their lives. We do the right thing, even in exceptional cases. All right. That's it for today. I have a funny feeling about today. I know you guys sometimes ask me for my woo. I don't think the news is done breaking yet today. And it's Friday in Trump land, so that wouldn't be surprising. But I got a feeling in my back pocket today that there's going to be some other big breaking news before the end of the day. I'm occasionally wrong on this, but not often. So if there's a need to come back and do an emergency broadcast later on this afternoon, I will. It just feels to me like one of those mornings where it's like the quiet before the storm. So buckle up. Maybe I'll be wrong. I'm going to encourage everybody to spend your weekend listening to Cowboy Carter, because it'll give you some joy and it'll make you laugh and it'll make you cry. And it's amazing. And if we don't have to be back here for the rest of today, that's even better. All right. But please like this broadcast and hit the subscribe button here on YouTube if you have not yet done so. I also just want to mention that if this work is meaningful to you, if it educates you, if it talks you off a ledge, if it gives you a reason to hope, please consider becoming a paid subscriber at patreon.com/resistance-live. The link is right here. You get to ask questions for 2 hours before every broadcast. You get to join us for Progressive Coffee Hour every Sunday, and you'll join an amazing community of people, like-minded, all on the same side of the fence. Subscription started as little as $2 a month. That's less than 10 cents a broadcast. And that's how we support this work financially. It's how I pay my staff. It's how the 4 or 5 hours that I put into doing this work every day gets compensated. So please, if you have not yet done so, think of it like a donation to NPR or PBS and head on over there and kick us a tiny fraction of what it costs to buy a cup of coffee at Starbucks. All right. I'm grateful so much for all of you, particularly our Patreon subscribers. If I don't see you this afternoon, I will see our Patreon friends over on Progressive Coffee Hour on Sunday morning at 8:30 a.m. Pacific, 11:30 Eastern. And I will catch the rest of you online, back here if necessary, Monday morning at the latest. And I hope you all have a wonderful and restful and peaceful and relaxing weekend. And don't forget to do the work. Like, commit to getting out the vote. Figure out what you're going to do today. All right, my friends. Have a great rest of your Friday, and I'll see you soon. Bye.